I remember we all got this kind of idea early on, like, okay, this is the real world, but these are like a handful of the most extreme people that you might encounter in the real world. We were thinking of movies like Network, which is about a TV station that elects to kill someone on live television for ratings. And at no point does it become like super over the top. And that's what grants it credibility.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, a man disowned by his wealthy family will stop at nothing to reclaim his inheritance in director John Patton Ford's dark comedy thriller, How to Make a Killing. Loosely inspired by the 1949 feature Kind Hearts and Coronets, the film tells the story of Becket Redfellow, a blue-collar worker disowned by his wealthy relatives. Determined to reclaim his inheritance, he launches a campaign of manipulation, betrayal, and calculated violence to eliminate everyone standing between him and the fortune. In addition to How to Make a Killing, Ford's other directorial credit includes the feature film Emily the Criminal, which earned him a nomination for the DGA's First Time Feature Film Award in 2022. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Ford spoke with Director Kobi Libii about filming How to Make a Killing. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
We were just chatting a little bit backstage. I really love this film, and one of the things I wanted to start with is I feel like it's hard to make a film that is in any way tonally ambitious. Right, it's really easy to make. It's not easy to make a film that's realistic, but there's a shared language if you're doing a realistic drama, right? But anytime you're sort of pushing the boundaries of that or trying to do something that's a little different, that's an extra level of challenge on what's already a really challenging job. So I guess my first question is, how did you approach getting everyone to make the same movie? Right, whether it's designers, actors, in the development phase, how did you approach pulling their very specific tone together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my first movie, which was called Emily the Criminal, was endeavoring to just be verite, Yeah. And so it became very clear when we had gotten something right, because it started to feel kind of real and kind of, you started to feel the verisimilitude, and when that happened, you're like, okay, that's it. That's what we're doing. This movie, completely different, because it almost can't totally live in that same universe, or it doesn't have like credibility. So it became this the biggest difficulty was like, when is it right exactly, and I remember we all got this kind of idea early on, like, okay, this is the real world, but these are like a handful of the most extreme people that you might encounter in the real world. Mm-hmm. We were thinking of movies like Network, which is about a TV station that elects to kill someone on live television for ratings. And at no point does it become like super over the top. And that's what grants it credibility. We were thinking of stuff like that. So it was a lot of like bringing actors kind of back down to earth. It's funny because I don't know how many of these decisions I can defend. What's weird is that, like, we're directors. I can talk to you guys about this stuff. It's like, it takes so long to make a movie that by the time you're done with it and you're like sitting on stage somewhere with a microphone, like, you are no longer the person who endeavored to make that movie to begin with. I never hear anyone talk about this.
Well, I want to talk about this specifically because there's definitely my experience making a movie. But my understanding of the journey of this film is that it's a particularly extreme version of that.
Yeah. And maybe that's why I'm bringing this up. Yeah.
It's true for all of us. You just have like the super version. Tell the people. Yeah.
Yeah, this was gnarly. I actually can't talk about the whole thing because I'm like legally not allowed, but I can tell you what I'm legally allowed. I wrote a draft initially, I think in 2013, I want to say. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
My 20s. And then ended up like getting on all like the lists, like the blacklist and stuff like that. Actually led to like me having a career. And it indirectly led to me getting my first movie made. I didn't write that script to direct it. I wrote it as a writing sample. This is like not cool to admit, but I remember at the time I was writing all these scripts and just no one cared. And I was like, you want some dumb shit with a voiceover that you don't have to, fine, here you go. You know, I was thinking like executives and they're all like frat boys. They'll read this, they'll get it, and maybe it'll work. And it did. And so I thought like, well, all right. And then I just didn't think about direct. And then after I directed my first movie, Studio Canal called me up. They own the rights to this. And they said, hey, do you want to talk about making that? And that had never crossed my mind. I was like, what? That really? But then I reread it and it occurred to me that like, I couldn't write that now. I'm like incapable, you know, I'm like too old. That was something I wrote when I was angry and like capable of just bombastic, extreme ideas in a way that like I probably wouldn't totally do now. And I can't even remember what the question was, but anyway, that's how it started.
No, and you're talking about, I mean, there's a collaborator of mine in the audience. We were literally talking about this the other day about that, you know, your relationship to your own juvenilia, right? Your relationship to stuff you made when you were young.
Is that a word? Juvenilia?
Isn't that, am I making that up? Is that it? Yeah, it's a real thing. Yeah, the stuff you make when you're young, right?
I think it is now, yeah.
I've decided it's a word. But that experience that I had on a much shorter time frame making a feature of looking back at the draft that was locked, you know, and being like, the guy who made that is a different guy.
Yeah.
and 2013 you shot this in
2024.
My God. And that's a decade. That's a decade difference, right? So I guess I want to talk about that process too, because you heard the sort of laughter of recognition describing that process.
Sure.
It's more extreme for you,
Yeah.
but how did you approach the sort of stewardship of almost interpreting this older you's?
That's what it was. It was like a weird anthropological study into someone I used to be and honoring that person. You know, that person wasn't wrong. And so that's kind of what I committed to doing. We also redeveloped the script. The reality is that the initial script was something that just like couldn't conceivably be filmed. It was insane. Like
why,
it was
why?
nuts. Like in the original, like first off, it was 10 years earlier. So he's like a millennial and he goes to Iraq and like fights in the war and comes back. It was wild. It was like Forrest Gump. There's so much more. And it was also way more violent and angry and insane, which like, maybe we should have done that. Whoops. And then Studio Canal was like, look, we're not going to spend like $60 million making this movie. So we got to figure it. So I had to redevelop it with them and kind of pull it back and make it more producible. And so anyway, to answer your question, I had to honor the kind of theme that I had struck on initially as a younger person while doing what I can to update it and make it something that I felt I could make now, you know?
What do you think the version of you in 2013 would have been most surprised by watching this cut?
Oh, God, that's terrifying. Oh, God. I don't know. I mean, the version of me in 2013 would just be amped that I have a job.
Yeah, sure.
Be like, wow, you made a movie and you got paid and you no longer live in a closet. Like that's probably what the version would be. But what would be the most surprising things? Probably the thematic stuff in the movie, the movie's willingness to wrestle with actual questions. I just don't think I was there, you know, and then, gosh, I don't know. There's so much I've learned since I don't even know where to start with that.
I'm interested to hear you say that too, though, about the thematic stuff, because I watched it before I did, 15 minutes of cursory research on the backstory of the development of this, and found out that detail, which I'm fascinated by. And I was sort of shocked by the idea of a person as, presumably young as you were, because that theme of, what is a good life and the sort of, ambition versus this sort of simplicity. To me, that's something I've only come to as a much older person, right? Like my 22-year-old self didn't know anything about that, right? And so I was surprised that kernel would have come from somebody that's that young. And I guess at this point in your career, in your life, like what spoke to you about that conversation about ambition and happiness? What about that theme was resonating with the artist you were when you made this film just a couple of years ago?
My first movie is about someone becoming a criminal to pay off her student loans. And I remember after I made it, kind of coming to understand, like, I think that was about me committing to be a filmmaker. You know, if Emily the Criminal is about someone committing to this thing that she learns that she really loves doing, despite the warning signs and despite the fact that it's really ill-advised, that sounds a lot like something I did, you know, like I just cannonballed into being a movie director despite the fact that that's nuts, you know?
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, I made that movie and the dust settled. And I think with this, it was a little like the danger of being so committed to something and so just kind of bloodthirsty to get this thing. It was almost like I had convinced myself earlier in life, like, I need to achieve this thing or else. And I worked towards it so intensely and for so long that I think I was guilty of losing track of what I thought that thing was actually going to provide for me, you know? So, and then, but the crazy thing is, by the time you've come to realize this stuff, by the time you've come to realize, like, maybe I didn't have to sacrifice quite that much for so long. By the time you come to realize that, you've already killed 7 people. You know what I mean?
No, I love that. I mean, it's such an evergreen theme that I think it's hard to make art about it that feels, you know, there's so many, you know, I'm a parent now. And one of the things that happens as a parent is you find out all the cliches are true. You know,
how many kids do you have?
I have 2 kids. You know,
congratulations. How old are they?
They're 1.5 and about to be 5.
Okay.
But all the, you know, all the like, oh, they grew up so fast. All the things your dumbest uncle said, you know, are every single one of them is true. You know, and it's a theme like that, right? Where it's just like money's not the solution to happiness. It turns out just like having a relationship and love and those things, you know. So it's incredibly hard, I think, to approach thematic territory like that is cliche, but it's cliche because it's deeply true, right? To approach that and give it traction, right? And I found traction there, and I want to dig into one scene specifically because I think for this audience, especially, like, picking at specifics is a little more fun than some of the other questions people ask in these kinds of things. There's that scene in the restaurant when they bail from the home dinner, right? And I really love that scene where she just sort of stumps him with the questions about what is enough. And I guess I'm curious, you know, both in terms of that scene and in terms of where the film ends, right? Which I think is weirdly wholesome, even though it's obviously so dark in certain ways. How do you, as a filmmaker, go about trying to communicate the particular idea you were about those things that are so sort of familiar and well covered? Like, how did you go about trying to consolidate that particular theme into something that an audience could wrap their head around?
Yeah, I think it was just a matter of making sure the story is populated by characters that were just going to highlight the dilemma of the central character, you know? I'm big into dilemma. That sounds funny. I love dilemmas. You know, I always thought, like, if, like, Hamlet was like, Hamlet shows up to the gate in the beginning and the dude's like, hey, guess what, man? Your uncle straight up murked your dad and married your mom. And Hamlet was like, what? I'm going to kill that guy. And then spent the next 2 hours, like, working his way up to kill that guy. It would be like Die Hard, the play. Like, no one would care. We'd forget about it. By the way, Die Hard's awesome. I just mean, like, it wouldn't be this timeless thing that's lasted for so long. It's the fact that he hears that news and he's infuriated. And then he meets this woman immediately afterwards who says, maybe just forget about it and come hang out with me. And he doesn't know which way is best. And he spends the next 2 hours, 3 hours trying to figure out, what do I do? You know? And I feel like that's much more akin to my experience in life and everyone's experience in life. I can only think of a handful of times in my life when I knew exactly what I wanted and worked tirelessly to get it. Most of my time is spent trying to figure out what I actually want. You know, do I want this or that? That's like all day, every day. And so I'm attracted to movies that reckon with that. And I think in this, it was just a matter of making sure that Jess Hennick's character had a certain trajectory to her, had a certain place where she was currently in her life. And that when Becket figured out where she was, it was going to challenge, you know, everything that he had been doing. But I had to make sure that by the time that came up, he had already, like, killed a couple people. That he was already, like, far enough along where it wouldn't be so easy to change course. I remember I love James Gray. There's a James Gray movie, Two Lovers. That's a crazy masterpiece that not enough people saw when it came out. And it's just one of the best examples of just dramatizing a dilemma for 120 minutes. I mean, it's so clean, does it so well. And it does it by having two women that the central character is torn between. It's kind of an old, maybe, I don't know, too often used idea, but I'm a crook. So what can I say?
Oh no, I love the way you put that, because there's a complicity that I feel as an audience member, because I'm, after his sweet mother dies, 20 minutes into the film, I'm rooting for him to kill these people off. Right. And that's part of the discomfort of the film, is that, I want him to go get these millions of dollars. And by the time the morality that we all actually have shows up and sort of confronts us, we've already gone down the road with him to a certain degree. And I think that's part of what makes it more sophisticated than a lot of portraits of this kind of morality are just, they show the bad boy being bad and we're outside of the bad boy and we watch the bad boy being bad and, sort of shake our finger at him. But this is much more interesting to me.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, this, I mean, I'm sure you guys know Kind Hearts and Coronets, right?
Probably does, right?
I'm sure there's, amazing movie by Robert Hamer, Ealing, black comedy, came out in 1949. And the idea for this was like contemporary American retelling of that story. I wanted to credit Kind Hearts in the opening credits. We weren't allowed to for, not the DGA, but I think the WGA. It was this whole thing. And I remember fighting down to the wire, like right down to like us creating the credits. I was like, it's going to make me look so bad if I don't, we like weren't able to do it.
I think
now I get all this like hate mail, like how dare you not credit? I'm like, ugh.
It's only people in this room that will
Dude.
make that reference. Yeah.
But anyway, Kind Hearts and Coronets it's like a different genre. It's like a screwball comedy. It's like a farce and it's incredibly great. But it's I just knew that if we were going to do this, it would need if we were going to do this movie now, I couldn't quite do it the same way. Mm-hmm. It would have to be something that has a little more believability and a little more thematic stuff to bite into.
Let's talk process a little bit. So when you had a script that you were sharing with collaborators, who's the first collaborator that you shared it with?
Wow, good question. Who was the first collaborator I shared it with? I think my cinematographer is a wonderful guy named Todd Van Hazel, who I went to film school with and who I've known for almost 20 years now, I guess 18 years. I sent it to him.
And tell me about how you guys work.
Gosh, man, like old. It's funny because this movie put us through it.
No one in this room can relate to that.
Yeah. Todd is more than a DP. He's like a filmmaker, and he's going to talk to you about every single thing. It's not the kind of DP relationship where you go to them with like a shot list and then you kind of talk through it. It's like a much more thorough conversation about what is this about, what do we want this to feel like, what's the POV, what are the references. Like we start way, way, way to the left. Like not even really talking about the movie, talking about other stuff, and then working our way towards it slowly.
And tell me about the slowly, because it's selfishly part of the joy of this is like we never get to really watch each other, right? And know what actually you do in the space between you and what for many of us is our closest collaborator. So you're having these conversations, and then quite literally what happens next, or happened next on this one?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I like talking about this stuff. I should preface that by saying he and I have known each other for so long. We've shot so many things, student films and documentaries and commercials and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot. It's like we hit the ground running, we already know the stuff we've done together that's worked and that hasn't worked. But in this case, got together. I remember he and I watching some references, kind of talking about, there's a lot of like how we don't want it to look. You know what I mean? There's a lot of just like, I don't want the, like the geeky, like this thing, I hate that thing. There's a lot of just like, just like pent up like resentment. And I remember he and I kind of arriving at this thing where we're like, we just want to be intentional in a way that I don't see a lot anymore. Like, let's like light it. For the love of God, let's just have like hard side light. Let's take a look at these references where people actually blasted a light. They used to do that, and so we were watching, like The Graduate and stuff like that, which works with incredibly directional light, and not being afraid of, hard shadows. And stuff like that. And then location scouting, a lot of tremendous stuff happening there and getting ideas. We shot this movie. Who here was at the previous screening with Gore Verbinski? Okay, so this is going to be the second movie shot in Cape Town you've seen today. Gore, can I call him Gore? I'm talking like I know this man. I do not know. I wish I did. He was shooting in Cape Town the same time we were, and taking all of our crew from us all the time because it was a much bigger movie, and God bless him. But anyway, we went down to Cape Town, and it's like a location cornucopia. There's so much stuff. The price of labor, this is uncomfortable to say, but the price of labor, incredibly cheap. So you can build a lot of sets and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so we were looking at locations and getting ideas for just how the movie was going to move when we were down there. And I remember getting down there and he and I talking a lot about like Casino, and talking a lot about Magnolia, and talking a lot about these movies that are almost like a montage for however long. That seem to be just in constant movement, almost like the central character's mind can't quite stay still. That have a really fluid sense of POV. The thing we didn't quite reckon with enough is just how hard it is to make one of those movies. And now whenever I see like Casino now, I'm like, how many times did they shoot that 4-second push in of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no. But that sense of motion, that sense of constant motion, I thought of the Ocean's movies, has that sort of that buoyant heist movie feel,
Yeah. The crazy part is that you're shooting that stuff and everything is so brief and so specific, you have no idea if any of it's going to add up. But now when I look at Ocean's 11, I'm like, oh man, he must have been losing his mind that whole time. Like he had no idea if any of that stuff was going to string together.
But just to sincerely as a peer, like having seen Emily the Criminal, which is that style, it's beautiful. But that style is so different than this. Yeah. And to me, to jump in to this style at this level is incredibly impressive. Like I watched this and I was like, I couldn't do that, not having done a lot of that before, so to me, that's just for what it's worth. I found that very impressive.
Oh, thanks, man. That means a lot. I mean, it was humbling. I got my ass handed to me daily on this movie. It was too much. It was a boneheaded thing to do for my second movie.
Well, what is it? I mean, I know the experience of, I call them fiddly bits, when you're doing these little montages and you have just piece.
It's 104 minutes of fiddly bits, man. Yeah. So many fiddly bits.
Is that what it was? It was just you couldn't.
Dude, it was around the whole thing, unreal. Right? Like there's this adage of, I think it's actually Soderbergh, speaking of the guy, that's like making a movie is like making a mural that's 10 blocks long and you're never more than 6 inches away from the wall. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I hope this looks good when I step back. It was like the ultimate version of that, like there's an 8-second scene of a DMV in Newark, New Jersey in 1995 that we shot in Cape Town. Okay. You got to build that. You got to cast everyone who works there. You got to create a wardrobe for them. Are there computers in the scene? Yeah, they're computer. Oh, okay, what's on the computers? I don't know, stuff you'd see in 1995. We have to design that. 8 seconds. And the whole movie is full of those things.
Yeah.
There's like an airport hangar and a plane. We went up in the sky and shot an airplane flying out of the sky. Yeah. Like one thing after the next, every single day was this never in the same location for more than a day. It was like shooting a bonkers commercial, but for 1/10 of the price of what you'd spend making a commercial for like the entire schedule.
But it's always like, you never know what it's like on the inside of stuff. But but there are scenes, and like one of the things I was surprised by and really caught off guard by was how the love stories, they're not even the love story and the charged, wicked flirtation, right? Those two tracks are legitimately really engaging. Those performances are really engaging. Without naming names, there's, at least one of those actors that I was like, wow, I didn't know you had that in you, in terms of the capability to have that. Were you able to sit down in some of those scenes and have a little more of a sense of, okay, I'm seeing the whole thing come in front of me, or was it just the sort of experience of shooting a music video the whole time?
No, that's fair. There are a handful of those scenes. It just felt like so much of our real estate in the shooting schedule was occupied by these much shorter things, simply because very often they were incredibly elaborate. And then we'd finally get to like whatever, like a restaurant, and there's like a restaurant scene, or just be like,
Yeah.
But the thing is, that would only be like 3 hours in the schedule.
So
and then it's,
but just to dig into this, because I'm sure it's an honest to God practical problem, right? Of the fiddly bits, right?
Yeah.
What if you were to make another film that had a lot of fiddly bits? Or if you were going to give advice to a filmmaker who had to make something with a lot of fiddly bits, is there anything you would do differently to make you less lose your mind around the sort of structure and organization?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to do it without losing your mind, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I would just say, are those calories that are going to pay off? You know, are you sure? That would be my question. Are you sure you don't want to take all the calories that you're going to burn trying to make this lived in world full of cast members who are only going to be there for 3 hours just to create this one moment? Are you sure you want to pour all your time and energy into that when perhaps it's other things that are going to provide the nutrients that the audience is going to actually care about? I think I'd be a little more conservative in that trade, but I don't know. I remember like after my first movie, I was trying to figure out what to make. And I don't know, I was like watching some documentary about David Bowie or something. And he's got this quote and he's like, to make anything good, you gotta it's like you're getting out into a swimming pool and your feet are touching the bottom. And then you get into the kind of, the deep end and your feet stop touching the bottom and then you're kind of floating. And he's like, now you're in the deep end and only then are you swimming, you know? So to make anything good, you actually have to kind of be swimming. You have to be away from this comfort zone. And I took his advice way too seriously. And now I know, don't listen to David Bowie. He's a space alien. He's nothing like you. No, it was a learning experience, and we went for it. You know.
I want to let's talk about actors a little bit. I was talking about the chemistry, in some of those relationships. How do you work with actors? Do you rehearse with them? Do you not? Could you? I mean, sometimes you want to and you can't. What was your process with them?
I think in a perfect world, yeah, I love rehearsing. It depends on the actor because a lot of actors just don't want to do that, and so there's a lot of me figuring out who they are ahead of time, and what their vibe is. In the case of this movie, there just wasn't really the opportunity, which kind of stinks, but I feel it's pretty common. We were just shooting on this crazy 6-day-a-week schedule, and a lot of the actors, no one was there for the whole run of show. So it's not like we could do like table read or something, like a table read with who. It's like we've got a couple kids here, and then like Glenn for this period of time, and then Margaret here, and then it was just like this Tetris schedule where no one was ever in the same place at the same time. So I would love to have rehearsed with everyone, but what we ended up doing was just kind of this old school thing where we'd get there in the morning, and I always just start with blocking before anything else, and spend a lot of time doing that. My DP and I just watch the blocking with the AD. We kind of throw the shot lists and the storyboards out the window at that point because I feel like it always changes. And you can just kind of vibe it out. I think like in a perfect world, after 2 or 3 days, the actor starts to take a lot of ownership and starts to be like, no, I do this, and I'm just a huge fan of kind of following that. And then, I don't know, usually before I go into production, I go over the script and I just come up with just verbs, just a lot of really simple kind of verbs. I can tell them stuff that they want in the scene that they can actually achieve in the scene. Because I feel like on set, when everyone's looking at you, very often I just forget that stuff. It flies out of my mind. So if I have kind of a cheat sheet, it helps me out.
In that regard, let's talk about the Margaret Qualley's performance, which is really delicious. But I think it's incredibly hard to direct a performance like that that's sort of neither here nor that, you're not sure what she wants and what especially watching it a second time just tonight, it feels incredibly specific. It feels incredibly purposeful. It tracks with what we know at the end is ultimately what's going on with her all the way through. How did you approach the dance of that particular performance?
I mean, that was just a lot of trusting her, I think we had some ideas about that character, and then she showed up and she wanted to do something that was just more specific, and a little more left of center. And I didn't quite know what to make of it at first, but then I saw her doing it and I began to kind of unpack it a little bit. Like in her mind, she's thinking, what kind of person is this? Who would do this? Yeah. Someone who has profoundly, like there's just something missing for them. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of like, kind of talking to her a long time beforehand and then sort of following her lead on the set. And then there was a lot of just like watching the effect that she had on Glenn. Glenn's like a sponge. He's really quick to get on like the level of another actor and kind of be in the scene with them. He's not someone who shows up with his idea and then like that's it, and other people are going to come to him. Like he's super adaptable. He's just like liquidy. And so there was a lot of just watching their combo together, and then just kind of like twisting a dial here and there just to get a rise out of Glenn Powell.
And we only have a minute or two left. I want to talk about sound a little bit before we go, because part of the polish of this film to my ear is, and part of what keeps that, perpetual motion so it keeps the transition so seamless is how expertly I felt like the sound told story and kept us crashing from place to place. Just practically, who designed it? Because I missed the credits.
Wonderful guy, Joachim Sandström is his name.
Yeah. Okay, great. And what was your? Did you have any sort of principles coming into that, or any particular way you approached that helped make it as effective as I at least found it?
I love sound. It's my favorite part of, I think, the filmmaking process, which sounds weird, but it is. I just love it. I think a lot about sound when I'm writing. I think a lot about sound with scene transitions. Yeah. I'll think of like when I'm writing, I'll just be thinking about like panning and stuff like that, And so when I get into the sound design, when I get into the mixing stage, I've already got like a billion ideas. And mixers hate me because like my notes that I give them are just like this giant novel of notes. And so I go into it with a lot of ideas, and then there's a lot of discovery and kind of messing around. And I think with a movie like this, that's so dense, that has so many scenes, my God, there are 216 scenes in a movie that's 104 minutes long. It's really reliant upon sound and telling the audience the story with sound. I mean, reckon for a moment that there's scenes that have diegetic sound. So sound mix, sound design, they have music that's like pumping, and they have a voiceover. And then the voiceover will dip down and there'll be dialogue on screen, and then the dialogue will go away and the voiceover will come back, and then the music will transition to another side. It's just like, Jesus Christ, all of that in 6 seconds. It's sort of like you're either completely hands-on with the sound, or it just becomes an unlistenable mess.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, because it sounds like a film where you wrote a lot of that sound in. Right, especially around those transitions, you really the smoothness of that would be incredibly hard to find after the fact. That said, to that point, what is there anything you really found in cutting this that wasn't in the plan and wasn't in the script? I guess pick one thing, pick one headline.
I don't even know. The post production on this movie was like just shoot me in the face. You guys want to know how long we cut this movie for?
How long?
308 days. 308 8-hour days. Yeah. It took forever. The entire movie is rethought in the editing room. I mean, there's virtually nothing it's completely reinvented. Yeah. And all the scenes with Glenn in the jail cell talking to the priest, that's stuff that we reshot almost a year after we shot the movie. So what did we discover in the editing room? Mainly that we needed to change the movie completely in order for it to work. That's the first thing. And then it was this crazy experience I've never had before in my life, which is, how do you change something? How do you get something to work with these pieces? And you just have no choice. You have to figure it out. My first movie spoiled me. It was like, when you get a box of Legos when you're a kid and there's like a pirate ship on the cover, and like, if I put them together the right way, it'll be a pirate ship. My first movie was like pirate ship. There it is. This one, pirate ship on the cover, and we put it together, and it was just like a weird amorphous shape with like a flag sticking out of it. And we're like, the studio was like, the fuck is it? We thought it was a pirate ship. And I was like, it's got a flag. And they were like, you better go back to work. And we're like, and it took an absolute eternity. I think a movie with that many scenes, with that amount of voiceover, it's just like you're kind of asking for it,
Let me ask you one question, then we're going to wrap up. You stare at something for 300 plus days. You know it better than anybody. You hate certain things that no one else will ever see. You also love certain little details, sort of out of proportion. And I'm curious, what's one tiny thing about the movie that you always appreciate a little bit more than you should, that maybe none of us would have even noticed?
I guess there are two things. The first victim that Glenn kills, that's Raph Law. That's Jude Law's son. He's an unbelievable actor, that guy. Like, he's so good. Like, I want to make a whole movie with him. He's incredible. And there was a part, we had him like mic'd up on this jet ski, and there's a part where he yelled "World Star" really yelled. That just it still makes me laugh.
I think it's in the cut.
It's in the cut. He's like motoring off. He's "World Star." It always makes me laugh. And then it's just the perfect thing for him to yell right there. And then there's another moment. There's a victim who like flies airplanes and is kind of like a Steve Fawcett sort of, I don't know, sort of character, like not Steve Fawcett, but the guy who founded Virgin. What's his name? Branson. Someone says, are you sure you want to fly to space when your own employees don't have health insurance? And he's like, well, it costs a lot of money, and if I could do it for cheap, I certainly would, but that's not realistic. Like that, that's just his complete misinterpretation of why the question is being asked. I always found amusing. I'm not sure anyone else does, but you gotta amuse yourself at the end of the day.
To be clear, heard World Star and enjoyed it, and specifically enjoyed that joke, of him misinterpreting that question. I think it's so funny. It's the kind of thing that's so funny we'll never quite get a laugh because it's not quite a joke, but it's extremely. We liked that, right? We like that. The people like that. All right, we got to get out of here. One more round of applause for your filmmaker. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America